welcome to the stage, please.
Thank you, Congresswoman, for being with us. And as they said, you're the co-chair of the AI caucus, but also you represent Silicon Valley as part of your district, and also has been voted as one of the most influential AI people by Time Magazine. So really thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Sanjay. It's great to be with you. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you.
Yeah. Congresswoman, AI has been talked about as one of the most transformative technologies of our lifetime. Mm-hmm. But just like with every technology, it has its risks and challenges. What are some of the risks that you look at when you look at regulation? You've been involved in almost all policy discussions happening in U.S. Congress. So tell our audience of business people some of the risks that you are looking at from an AI perspective.
Well, I think that first, I look to our past and what past challenges have been to our society, to our entire country, and legislation that has become law as a result of many of the struggles in our country. And all of the ills have not necessarily been cured, but we've made progress. So what do we need to look for that will not set us back in our society? We know that inequities still remain for many people in our society, and so AI should not exacerbate those inequities in our society. So that is, I think, a broad concern on both sides of the aisle, maybe a little more on the Democratic side, but it is something that if members were not thinking of it, the work of the bipartisan AI caucus is to bring in experts that would help essentially educate members. And we've done that now for almost 2 years, and I think that it has really advanced the thinking of members and highlighted what we need to build into legislation. So we don't want any of the inequities that exist today to be exacerbated, and I think that that's one of the top concerns. But we also have very important laws that are on the books relative to financial services, to civil rights, to housing, and so we're not starting from scratch. We're not starting from scratch, and but we also need to direct the executive branch, the agencies, to be able to enforce the laws that are already on the books as it relates to AI.
So a lot of our guests here today work on innovative companies. A lot of companies in your district are innovators. How do you balance innovation versus regulation? I mean, that's the challenge that is constantly there. Innovators sometimes don't want as much regulation, and sometimes regulation is important.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Okay. And I say that because with the appropriate level of regulation, there can be stability. So people know what the rules of the road are, so to speak. So I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. And I think that, if AI is a mystery to the larger population, they don't understand it. They've heard many people hear things that are menacing. We know as members of Congress that our first and top responsibility is to protect and defend. And so our national security is a very important part of this, a high level of importance to this effort as well. And I have legislation on that as well relative to our biosecurity. But we want the general population to trust. And I think that with the right type of legislation that we can really enlarge the trust, and I think that trust helps to breed acceptance, and it also can breed more innovation. So I don't find them to be mutually exclusive.
Congresswoman, you talked about learning from the past. Social media is an example of learning from the past, where we have consolidation amongst a few companies that kind of run all our social media networks. There is a fear that the same thing could happen with AI, where because AI is an expensive argument, you look at some of the sponsors here, it takes a lot of compute power, a lot of training, et cetera. It could end up in the hands of few. Is Congress looking at monopolistic tendencies for AI?
Well, I've anticipated it. So I've been working with Stanford University's Human-Centered AI Institute, and a woman that I think is the mother of AI, Fei Li, for the last 5-6 years. And so we've developed legislation that is moving slowly, but at least it's moving, and it's called the CREATE Act. And what the CREATE Act does is to essentially democratize AI. As you said, the resources are really in the hands of the largest companies, tech companies. And I don't resent that. I mean, it's a natural occurrence almost for them. But our country is made up of many sectors. There's the medical sector, there's the academic sector, there's the nonprofit, there's certainly the private, and the public. And so AI research and the researchers need to have access to all of this and the tools. And that's what this legislation does. And I'm pleased. I'm fairly optimistic about this legislation. It is bipartisan. It is bicameral. It's moving in the House. It's moving in the Senate. Nothing moves quickly. All right, nothing moves quickly. But the operational word here is moving. So, and it was reflected in the president's executive order that came out much earlier this year. So I'm very hopeful. And the private sector support for it, many stakeholders in the private sector. So I'm encouraged. It's a top priority for me to get this through before I leave the Congress at the end of the year.
So the CREATE AI Act would give resources, compute resources to smaller companies, entrepreneurs, et cetera.
Yes.
And it would do it in conjunction with what, the National Science Foundation and other organizations?
Yes.
This is for entrepreneurs here who are listening.
Yeah, well, there is a model right now that was created by my legislation that became law, working with Stanford for the actual infrastructure for this, and it's called the NAIR, NAIRR, and there is a great deal of activity that's taking place right now between different agencies in the executive branch. And the president had this in his executive order, and in 90 days, there was an exhibit that the agencies, at my invitation, came to the Hill, and it was astounding to me because, there are 2 clocks on the wall. One is regular time, the other is government time. But in 90 days, what the agencies had done in cooperation with each other in terms of launching several projects. It was very exciting, and it was highly instructive to me. So we want this to take place all over the country. And so I'm quite optimistic about it.
You talked about two different times. So just to follow up on that, AI is moving at, there's a new announcement every day. You talk about agents, multimodal. We had some speakers here talk about the hyperscalers, all kinds of things happening. Policy moves, as you said, in government time. So how does policy kind of keep pace? You set some policy a year, 2 years down the road. The technology could be evolving in such a different manner. So how do we make sure that there is some kind of a sync here, Congresswoman?
Well, I think it's important for, it's very often said that states are the, the incubators for policy. I think that whatever we do on the regulation side, the investments so that this is broad and deep is very important. And I hope that a future Congress will not put in place that the federal government regulations are it can only be one way. You have to allow for innovation to come. It doesn't start from up here. It starts from here. It starts small and it grows. So I hope that it's not a ceiling. It should be a floor.
Most of the companies, some of the companies here are global companies, Congresswoman, who work across different geographies. As you know, the EU has just passed its EU AI Act. China is doing its own thing, UK is doing its own thing, India is doing its own thing, and we are doing our own thing. What do you see as a role for international collaboration in terms of AI regulation? So there's some kind of a harmonization. If a company is working across geographies, they probably have to hire multiple lawyers who have expertise. And now on top of that, within the US, we have several states like California, Colorado that have passed legislation. So this is for companies here who work globally. Role of international collaboration, what do you see, Congresswoman?
Well, I think it's very important for the United States to be number one. I'm not satisfied with 7th or 17th or 14th. We want to be number one, seize this. But AI doesn't recognize any borders. So, the case for working with countries around the world is absolutely essential. And when we do, and we must, we need to always advance our country's values. We're a democracy. And so those values, and there are others that share them as well, is very important. So that cooperation is very important. But we also have adversaries, and we should not ignore them. China comes to mind, right? And so even though it's somewhat of a rocky road with China right now, in the area of AI, we have to look for every opportunity to cooperate. But of course, our national security has to always come first. But it doesn't mean that we leave them out of the equation. We can't afford to. It would be foolish.
So have cooperation or communication with many different regions. Workforce is an area, Congresswoman, that has, there's been talk about AI impacting large numbers of our workforce, especially white-collar workers. You look at the McKinsey report, the IMF report. So on one hand, you have 30-40% of people getting impacted by that. On the other hand, there is a shortage of AI talent in this country. Does Congress have some kind of a role in this situation in terms of workforce?
It's an excellent question, and it's a question that constituents ask on a consistent basis because very typically their fears are what they speak to, and job displacement. It's menacing, and But I see, with every challenge that we have, I view it through the lens of it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to go to another level. So as some jobs people will be displaced, those jobs will not be the jobs that they are today, but there's an opportunity to retrain. And in meeting with so many of the companies in my congressional district, every single job in AI does not require a PhD. There is a whole area of opportunity where our community colleges, a 2-year training course or less, where they can, people can be essentially retooled, I guess. So does the federal government have a role in this? Absolutely. And I think it's important on the funding side, because as institutions have to re-gear their training, that requires some dollars. Look, many of these efforts are not new to us. We have a challenge. It is an opportunity where we see where new areas of employment are more than possible. They are probable and will be the case. Then prepare for it. This is not a mystery to us. But we have to be very purposeful about the path and what we need to do. And this is a huge opportunity for the United States of America on the national and international stage to improve medicine, to improve life for people. This is what the American people, I think people all over the world look for. They want a better life. They want better outcomes. So I view this as an enormous opportunity, being mindful of what the challenges are, both to our national security, to society and how we function, and the fairness that we want in our society. I don't find it menacing. What I worry about is that we won't seize the opportunity. And Congress has a key role in this, and I'm pressing very hard to get some of the basics in place that are foundational to all of this. And then colleagues will take up the rest in succeeding Congresses. One of the areas that people are very, very worried about is what's real and what's fake. Mm-hmm. And that's a legitimate concern. And it's highly legitimate in a campaign season. I don't know whether Congress will step up and get something done that will apply before the November elections, but we should. I have legislation, again, in that area that would direct NIST to develop the standards